I'm glad you're here. Let's learn some Torah. Vayikra, Leviticus, is the book that we're reading right now, and the parsha that we're entertaining this week is called Emor. Emor enumerates all the facets of the religious rites and the practices and the sacrificial acts that were done in the desert, later on in the Mishkan, later on in the Beit HaMikdash, in the temple. And the people who ran these services were called Kohanim. Singular would be Kohen. A priest is how it's usually rendered in English. A Kohen is somebody who is descended from Moses' brother Aaron. He was the first Kohen, and everyone from father to son is patrilineal that is descended from this line is a Kohen. So in this parsha, the Kohanim are told who is qualified to lead the rites and rituals and the sacrifices. And we're explicitly told by the details enumerated there that anyone who has a series of 12 physical disabilities would be disbarred from running the services. Not disbarred from being a Kohen, but they would not be allowed to run the religious services. And one wonders why this might be so, especially given what we have learned earlier on in the books of Genesis and Exodus. I'd like you to think about Isaac for a moment, the second patriarch, who was in his old age very infirmed and blind. Had he been a Kohen living later, he would have been disqualified. His son Jacob, who had an altercation with an angel or a man and left him limp for the rest of his life, unable to walk like any other human being might be able to walk, he would be disqualified. Later on, Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, our teacher, our leader, had a terrible defect of speech. He would have been disqualified from being a Kohen. So what do we learn from, on the one hand, the Kohen needing to be fully capable and physical form of meeting out the duties of a Kohen, and on the other hand, all of these great leaders of the past who would not have met the criteria of being a Kohen? What do we learn from this? I'd like to take you back to the Holocaust era, where there's a story about a man who was a very famous chazan, a very famous cantor in Eastern Europe, who was brutalized by the Nazis. He was operated on ruthlessly by the Nazis, and he was left a shell of a human being physically in the aftermath. He survived. In one Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, after the Holocaust had ended, he attended services, and somebody recognized him as one of the famous cantors in one of the greatest communities of Europe. And they said to him, "Why don't you lead us?" And he said, "Look at me. Look at what they did to me. Look what those beasts did to me. I shouldn't lead." The rabbi who was listening to the conversation went over and said, "Precisely because of what has happened to you, you are the most qualified to lead us in these prayers." So what are we to learn from, on the one hand, we have all of these great patriarchs of the past that were impaired, and all of these criteria that are listed by the Torah, by the Kohanim, things that would disqualify them from leading. I think what we're supposed to learn is not to judge. Because perhaps what the Torah is trying to teach us is that we make assumptions about people's character based on the way that they look, that they should be disqualified because they're not really emblematic of somebody that's going to be the leader of our people. But that disability may be, in fact, precisely what makes them most qualified to lead. And so we learn from this not to make those character judgments about people based upon the way that they talk, or the way they present themselves, or how much money they have in the bank, or the car that they drive, or their education, or how much money they have in the bank. Those are things that should never allow ourselves to make judgment calls about another human being. Look at them, peer at them. They, like you, are made in the image of God.